on this computer. All right. Okay, welcome to Literally Alive, brought to you by Littoral Books, Maine's independent publisher of poetry, fiction, and nonfiction books based in Portland, Maine. Bringing you new poetry titles such as You Are Ruining My Loneliness by Kate Kearns, With Little Light and Sometimes None at All by Richard Foerster, and a new hot-off-the-press fiction book by Laurel Dodge, The Buoyant Letters of Mimsy Bell. My name is Robert Diamante, and I will be sitting back with you all in the audience to listen to tonight's guests read from their latest Littoral Books publications. And you can also visit the Littoral Books website to purchase these books at any point. And they make lovely Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa, holiday gifts, or just gifts for yourself, because the gift of reading is the best gift of all. So tonight's guests are Richard, Laurel, and Kate. And Richard Foerster was born in the Bronx, New York in 1949, the son of a German immigrants. He holds degrees in English literature from Fordham College and the University of Virginia. His numerous honors include the Discovery the Nation Award, Poetry Magazine's Bess Hockin Prize, a Maine Arts Commission Fellowship, the Amy Lowell Poetry Traveling Scholarship, and 2 National Endowment for the Arts Poetry Fellowships, as well as 2 Maine Literary Awards for poetry. Since the late 1970s, his work has appeared widely in magazines and anthologies, including The Best American Poetry, the Kenyon Review, Tri-Quarterly, the Gettysburg Review, Shenandoah, the Southern Review, and Poetry. His 8th book, Boy on a Doorstep, New and Selected Poems, received the 2020 Poetry by the Sea Book Award. Foerster has worked as a lexicographer, educational writer, a typesetter, a teacher, and editor of literary magazines Chelsea and the Chautauqua Literary Journal. He lives in a former Nazarene church in Eliot, Maine, with his partner, the artist Douglas Taylor. Welcome, Richard. Our next guest is Laurel Dodge, who graduated from the Environmental Studies Department at Bowdoin College and got her master's degree at Antioch. She has worked as a naturalist for a nature center, a land trust, and a zoo. She lives on an old farm with a big white barn in mid-coast Maine with her husband, kids, cats, and dog. The Buoyant Letters of Mimsy Bell is her first novel. And last but not least is Kate Kearns, whose poems have appeared in numerous literary journals, including Salamander and Northern New England Review, in the Maine Sunday Telegram, and on Maine Public's Poems from Here. You Are Ruining My Loneliness, published by Littoral Books, is her debut collection. She lives with her family in southern Maine. Welcome, Kate. Can you kick us off?
Yes, I'd be happy to kick us off. Thinking about reading here with Richard and Laurel, I've been thinking about the connections between all of our work because I've been reading them and enjoying them lately. And the fact that Laurel's fiction is epistolary and written in letter form makes it really juicy to talk about side by side with poetry. And when I think about doing a reading, I try to give myself a bit of a theme to bring my brain together, so I stay in a kind of on a path. And thinking about the 3 of us, my mental theme for the night, which you can follow or bust away from, is correspondence. So that being said, I'm going to start off with a poem that Laurel said she enjoyed, that I think pulls a lot of our common themes together. So this is from You're Ruining My Loneliness. It's the first poem in the book, and it's called Dear After. The resurrection fern, down curled and drought crisp, waits dry in a gray between, then, when water steeps it again, revives to evergreen. In limbo it thrives, patient, like the wood frog whose eggy body freezes solid in winter, its blood a tangled icicle. Though heart and brain clink like crystal and stop their vital work, livingness, somewhere inside, lives. Thaws with the brook silt and starts back up. It goes on, just like that, and water fills the dirt brown fern to green. Dear After, I don't know what to ask for. I don't know where this correspondence goes. My love sleeps warm beside me. Someday, soon or not soon, for one of us than the other, this query will become an elegy. Remind me it's possible to feel this. It's possible for atoms to disperse as they will, by all evidence scattered, while a frond of warmth, the long fact of it, holds, like a body's imprint in its bed.
That's beautiful, Kate.
Thanks,
And
Laurel.
one of the reasons that I enjoyed it the most, other than obviously all three of us have that connection to nature, and you're talking about the wood frog, and I've done a lot of programs on wood frogs, but you have teased from the natural life cycles the ultimate question of love and loss in the second half of the poem.
You do the same with the river in your book a lot of the time.
That definitely resonated with me for that
Yeah.
reason.
I've enjoyed your book, Kate, and very much admire your attention to nature and natural details and the specificity of things. You know, hear how the frog is really frozen solid, and yet it comes back to life, and that there's something very true about all of nature, that even, you know, after forest fires and the devastation, and nature comes back. And in my book, I have several poems that deal with the devastation that we're causing on the planet, and how there's have to hang on to hope.
Yeah. We're going to toss it next to Laurel to start us off with her first letter in Mimsy Bell, I believe, right?
Yep. So,
Yes.
all right. In the Buoyant Letters of Mimsy Bell, the main character has returned home from a long, wild life on the road. So she has returned home, and she is writing to a boyfriend who died in a river accident.
Laurel, can I interrupt for just a moment and excuse me? Could you just sort of set up the plot of Mimsy Bell for those that might not know, just very generally?
Okay. So the Buoyant Letters of Mimsy Bell is about a woman who had a wild boyfriend in a very small town, which is a thinly disguised Freiburg, Maine. And after a river accident that took her boyfriend's life at about 20 years old, she was recovering. She's a fiddler. She went to the county fair, and she was discovered by a young musician who then became famous. And she was on the road for 60 years, drugs, rock and roll, the usual. After her husband in the band dies, she is sort of pushed out of the band, and she decides to go home to monotony, which is the thinly disguised Freiburg, and make peace with the river that took her love, find a place to be buried amongst her kin, and to be the woman she was before the band. So I'll begin now with the first letter to Gerald. Dear Gerald, the water into which I release this letter is not the same water in which you slipped away, though the river remains the same, sinuous, deceptive, violent. Cursed though she is, people still come from all directions to bob along on floats, ride her rapids, and dance and drink themselves insensate on her beaches as if she were tame. It is said she takes 3 lives per year, a debt for a wrong done many years ago. The year of your death, she took only 2. I'd like to think you were so alive you counted for more than one, that your sacrifice spared another. 60 years ago, The water ran like silk under our canoe, your paddle on the left, mine on the right. You were heavier by a few pounds, so you took the stern, even though I was better at steering through the boulders. Those boulders remain in place. The river's done her best to bury a few, but then she digs them up again. They never travel, not like the millions of other stones she incessantly sorts, always by size, from the smallest clay particles to silt, sand, granules, pebbles, and finally the cobbles. The boulders, they wait, immobile, frozen beneath the surface, as they did the day she took you from me. 60 years ago, her banks were flushed with crimson cardinal flower and a delicate white flower I never found in any field guide. You'd stripped to the waist, and my eyes soaked in the strength of your body like nourishment. We heard the wood thrush beguiling us with his magical flute. We smiled and kissed and made love in a bed of pine needles, our bodies reflected in the water. You and I and the river, all the right ones together. Today I watch the young people in their canoes pass by banks covered with trillium and lady slipper. They wear bikinis and board shorts, their bodies mostly naked in the sun. The air is fresh, so clean, their city lungs are drinking it in like ambrosia. Brown-headed cowbirds sing with a watery burbling, serenading the lovers who laugh too loudly, drink too much, and make out with all the wrong partners. Your face was rapturous after we made love. That is what I remember from the best day of my life. Your eyes were empty after you hit the boulder. That is what I remember from the worst day of my life. 2 days that were one. If only I had the luxury of remembering the first and forgetting the second. Sometimes on the road with the band, I hoped that the next hit or toke would be the one that erased that sector of my brain, but drugs never offer such kindnesses. After you died, I gave up my home. You slipped away, I turned away, away from friends, neighbors, the nets my family threw out to break my fall. The young people nowadays say to find your tribe, as if surrounding yourself with people just like you will insulate you against the big bad world out there. Well, I had a tribe for 60 years. We looked alike, thought alike. Our dreams were all the same, but membership was conditional. And when Lawrence died, I no longer met their criteria. The elderly widow of a great musician with no chops of her own was someone to leave behind, an unnecessary burden. Back here in Monotony, I am not Mrs. Lawrence Bell. I am baby Maggie, who had such terrible colic that her mother had to walk her around and around the gazebo in the town square 100 times a night until she settled. I am Margaret, the little girl who got her head stuck between the posts of the library railing and howled so fiercely half the town came to witness my release. I am the 10-year-old Meg, who stole the licorice whip from the 5 and dime and got beaten with it after the shopkeeper chased her down and snatched it from her guilty hand. And I am the svelte, young, fresh ingenue Mimsy, who took up with the wildest boy in town, despite the headmaster, the minister, and the sheriff having given me the lowdown on your background. It is comforting to have everyone's provenance in the back of my mind. Who is whose baby, cousin, auntie, business partner, sworn enemy, ex-boyfriend, or secret lover. To know how they fit together, how they've rooted and branched out since their families first settled here 250 years ago, or for some like me, returning just last week. The human landscape is at a scale that makes sense. They are all neighbors, and there are not so many of them that I can't keep track. And the physical landscape hasn't changed. I can walk upon the same roads and paths I knew when I was a girl. And even before I could walk, my mind imprinted on these woods and fields, their mountain backdrops, and on that damn river. I traded this community for a tribe because I couldn't handle all the reminders of you. I am old enough to know better now, just shy of 81. I aim to make peace with the river. I want to return to being who I was when I was with you. I want to be buried at home. And I think there is just enough time left to weave myself back into the fabric of this town so that they can legitimately lay me to rest in its soil. I've collected antique bottles ever since we dug around in that old dump in the woods and unearthed the one I fancied so, the dark cobalt blue. The ones in my collection are all different, mostly patent medicine, some sarsaparilla, some sulfur bitters, all from antique shops. One day I found myself ordering corks to fit. I suspect they are seaworthy now, or river-worthy, as that is what I need them to be. I often wondered if I'd let go of the canoe and followed the roiling waters to the sea, if I might have found you there. Maybe these letters will. I've missed you, Mimsy.
I love Mimsy. She's such a cool character. I kind of want to be her when I grow up. It seems like, because of course I look at it from the poet's lens, I've never been able to write fiction. You use a lot of the tools of poetry in this book because of the letter form, and the fact that there are no dates makes them, they're clearly chronological. So you're not jumping around in time, but you're not entirely sure how much time goes by in them. So it makes them timeless in that way. And even though each one is of a particular moment, they're all connected with an arc, and it reminds me of a poetry collection in that way, even though it's more narrative. It's quite fun to read that way.
I mean, I have, since I was a child, have adored words, you know, probably just like you, reading the dictionary and just learning as much as I could about words, and the poetics of the sounds of words are very important to me when I write. And letters are a unique vehicle for putting thought forth, because you have to organize your thoughts, because you're writing to someone as opposed to just stream of consciousness. So it's a epistolary, I think, is my sweet spot in writing.
I'll have to confess that I haven't read the book yet. Just what you sent me in manuscript, and I only received it this morning, so I just read a bit, but I've very much started to fall in love with Mimsy. And what I like, and I think when you read the second letter later, people will see how smart she is, and that she does have it together. I don't know what the crisis will be in the story as it proceeds, but I love how you begin with the river. And I immediately thought of Heraclitus, that you cannot step into the same river twice. And I suspect that you're going to develop that somehow during the course of the book.
Sometimes when people ask me for a one sentence description of my book, which is almost impossible.
The most frustrating question in the world for all of us.
Difficult. The elevator pitch in one sentence, I say it's about an 80-year-old woman in a fight with a river. So basically.
Yeah, and I love how she'll get mad at it too. Like, even though, and the way she writes to Gerald in the beginning, it's love letters to a past love, but there are points in the book where she's pissed off at him, and she's like fighting against this person who can't really fight back, but she still kind of gets there on her own. So
in some ways she's writing to him, in some ways she's writing to herself.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. I was like, it's the question we all deal, like poets, and when you're writing to a you from an I, it's like, who are you actually writing to? Whether it's the literal person you have in mind as the you, Or are you writing to yourself? Or are you writing to, especially Richard, in your poems, it seems like a lot of them, you've got that correspondence with nature, but also with the present self and the past self, and the way the present self sees this thing in nature as compared to the way the past self did as well. There are all these interlocking layers of all these different perspectives and lenses that come through that I really like.
The book, as I imagined it, was, twofold. The first part is the adult of a certain age looking back to a troubled childhood and trying to make sense of it, and how do we survive it and move on into adulthood. And the second part of the book is very much about somebody in his 70s who is looking toward the end, and how do we deal with that, and how do we maintain hope. So
Richard, can you read something from your
I was
book?
just going to say,
Yes,
let's
I
hear a
will.
poem.
I'll start with the two first poems. The one is sort of a preamble, and it's very short, only eight lines, and it's called Plein Air Sketch. And it's very much, if you imagine a Japanese black ink quick sketch of a crow. Plein air sketch. A charcoal smudge lifts from a willow on the creek's far bank. It trails a scrap of awe from my throat. I have no other voice but that dark sheen's raw calling. And then the poem that really sets up the themes for the first part of the book is called Aspens. Last night, the fool in me waking, as if half drunk, wanted to dance when the wind came up, insistent as surf, and lofted my bedroom window sheers like veils about my shoulders. A wish, a whoosh, a clacking like castanets moved through the limbs of the aspens that border my lawn, had set them dervishing, the whole congregation moonlit, on tiptoes, as if in frenzied praise of a God made manifest, riding on a sweep of wind. And I felt certain the aspens would endure again the quaking current of that ecstasy. In light, it's hard not to believe optimism is just stubborn pretense. This morning, 3 trees lay felled, their roots exposed like hacked bones in open graves. I've stood before in the stillness of afterstorm, the everywhereness of it, among litter strewn from far corners of my brain, the stutter and static of news, brittling green, torn from cliches of hope and tides of war and brewing storm, and stared into a wreckage of words left abandoned on the page, as if I'd never been that god of weather. And so I wield again the grumbling bite of a chainsaw. I'll make neat courts of nuisance. I'll hitch the stumps to a truck and yank them out, easy as teeth, easy as taking a rake to smooth over what's past, tamp it flat with my muck boots in a foolish dance.
I love your endings in your poems. There was something, they bring a little something new in and open up at the end that I always enjoy.
I've always thought of the aspens and the poplars as the most musical of trees. So, and usually you think about the leaves, but you're talking about the storm and the actual trunks, and then the cracking and the death
And
of the
the
aspen.
castanets of the leaves going in the
Oh,
sea.
exactly. And then you get the contradiction at the end from the orchestra of the tree to the grumble of the chainsaw and the sort of mucky footprints of your dance. So I enjoyed that. But would you expand a little bit on how you were mentioned earlier that it was the beginning of unwrapping the childhood versus the present?
Yeah, this poem ends by saying, and going to yank out the stumps, the things of the past that have been destroyed and ruined. Easy as teeth. Well, it's not easy as teeth, is it? And to smooth over what's past, tamp it flat with my buck boots, but it's a foolish dance because the past is never really gone. And there are other poems in the first half of the book. One is called Bijou Box, and about the things we keep and that inform who we were, and when we take them off the shelf again, they define who we are now in relation to what is past.
I noticed there are a lot of poems in the collection that refer or sparked by, pardon me, material culture, heirlooms, tokens, things you've kept. And they have a great presence in your work. Tell me a little about those little things. And just, I had the thought of what the younger generations and their desire to minimalize and have nothing, how you'd respond to them.
I know if you watch Antiques Roadshow, you see all these wonderful heirlooms and what they were worth in 2005, and now you see the arrow go down, and it's because young people do not want these things. They have not. Our culture has changed so much. And I think because young people cannot really afford homes early. I had my own house when I was in my 20s. I can't imagine most 20-year-olds now owning a home. And so they don't want to collect things. They have no place to put the things.
But what would you say about the things themselves? I mean, you don't need hundreds of things, but those little things that you mentioned.
Yeah.
How are they sparking in you something?
Should I read Bijou Box about three little things? Okay. It starts off, it's in 4 parts. And it starts off with an epigraph from Marie Kondo, who is all about decluttering one's life. And I, of course, don't agree with this sentiment. But when we really delve into the reasons why we can't let something go, there are only 2. An attachment to the past or fear for the future. I'm always skeptical of these either or things, one or the other. It's often the truth is somewhere between. Sea glass. I forget in what ebb tide we were walking when this pale iris blinked up from the sand, and I first cradled its icy stare in my hand, this capsule of loss, the brine of time scoured to powdery eggshell blue. Sometimes I still try to imagine the unbroken bottle, the promised cure it once held, the ark that consigned the vessel to those waves. The second part is biglietto, which is Italian for ticket. Why not chuck it now the journey's done? This little tombstone stamped 26 August 68, Brindisi, Roma, Termini, 2nd class. That train stuttered and lurched through the night, the compartment humid with sweat, where I sat opposite 3 Italian graces, or fates in mourner's black. With their hairy pits and a pungent log of cheese they gladly shared. Me, 18, luscious as a grape in their cold eyes. O Purgatorio, when the eternal city via Foggia, Aversa rumbled into view, and the train gasped in a final fit of steam. The platform rose like a wave that swept me toward a further judgment I was ill-prepared to face. Noble White, and that's, of course, the Edelweiss flower. In a cracked plastic case floats the brittle blossom of Alpine Heights, an elder cousin picked and pressed for me. Memento of a fatherland he feared was never properly mine. Under the cushion he snuck a Reichsmark from the years he trekked with Deutsches Jungvolk in pure Bavarian air. I keep it as I must, the bent cross secreted like a brand that thrusts from time to time to scar the snowy underflesh of words like Edelweiss. St. Anthony medal. The silver's tarnished gunmetal black. In dark relief, the tonsured patron of lost and stolen things in the iconography of a faith I once held, still embraces the impossible child. Legend says it was an illuminated psalter for whose return he prayed, and amid the tomb's decay, when they opened it, was found the relic of his incorruptible tongue. The priests that blessed this amulet bid me wear it near my throat to give voice to longing, to whittle it to words. Some days my thumb wanders its surface, abrading it to shine, howsoever thinly, like a tide's first returning to the shore, and in a blinding moment's miraculous clarity to deliver me once more, the castaway I'd forsaken long ago to storm and given up to drown. So what I hope in those sections is that it starts off with that bit of glass that was found along with the companion long ago. And as you said, Laurel, you know, the cobalt blue of the glass, you know, all these C-class things are usually bits of a bottle that was thrown away 100 years ago or more. And then the Edelweiss that my cousin put a Nazi coin underneath, you know, that yes, you have to keep those things because that is a part of your history, and to ignore that history is to diminish one. And then the medal is the thing that you try to bring back through faith that can restore you in some way, to connect the troubled past with the present and to reunite it all in a circle. So that's how I hope that these little things that I keep make sense.
That's a wonderful expression of wisdom, actually. Thank you.
Yeah. Kate, there's a lot of mythology in my poems. And so when I read Penelope, I was very, very taken by it. Would you mind reading it for us?
Sure, I would love to. Penelope actually, it was supposed to be one poem sooner in the original manuscript so that the two poems that deal with being a military spouse would come right before it. And it served me right for trying to manipulate the reader, because that one and the two in between it now, Golden Hour and Flight Toward Memorial, also kind of belong together in my mind. And those are the only ones that Agnes asked me to move when we were typesetting the book so that Golden Hour would open up in its own 2-page thing.
I had that same experience, and it makes for
Yeah.
a much more
And it
beautiful
was
book.
kind of fate, because that's what you get for trying to manipulate the reader, or tell them how to think or how to consider them. So I thought that was funny. And it turns out beautifully. But yes, the Penelope for me, of course, the way into it was thinking about being the spouse while the beloved is away in harm's way and trying to make their way home. And that's, of course, how mythology has lasted so long, because it's a lens that we can process our own things through in an immortal kind of way. And I've actually never read this one at a reading before, so it's cool that we're doing it this way and that you requested it. So I'm excited about this. Okay. Penelope. And of course, before I read, I'll give anybody in the audience who doesn't know, Penelope was the wife of Odysseus. So she was home on Ithaca, their home island, fending off the people who were trying to take Odysseus's place while he was trying to make his way home from the Trojan Wars in the Odyssey. Penelope. The sea is full of monsters, so's the land. Still you will, your body will, come home full of wind and blood, all motion. You'll kiss me. Our child will remember you. Though the loss of you is a strung bow, you will walk barefoot our scarred halls. Though gods who cannot die play games with death, though nothing's as large and fragile as a god's ego, though the sea is full of monsters as well as the land, don't become a monster for my sake. No weapon will touch me on our sheep-warm island. Think of the sheep, their strange eyes and flat, busy teeth. They the wool, you the warp, I weft. Love, we've both unraveled to survive, unraveled, woven over and woven over again into people who can live without each other. No weapons for miles, but we're both heroes of the same story. You'll come home, kiss me, our child will remember you, tougher, both of us, at our crack-knit hems. We'll once more unravel and weave over again.
This poem must really should touch the heart of any military spouse. And in a poem before that I read, you were talking about how, oh, it's one from your next collection. You were talking about how you like to travel, but your husband has already been to the desert and wants to be home. What struggles of the life of military spouse and a returning service member inspire some of your work?
Goodness, that's a good question. I mean, sometimes it's that absence and thinking of the person where they are and not being able to, even though technology has helped a little bit, it's still very similar to the way it used to be in that there's not a lot of communication and that you don't hear from that person a lot. So it's similar to the letter form for you, where at least when my husband was away the first time, there was very little Wi-Fi for him. He couldn't just write me an email or call. I was still the spouse waiting at home, waiting to hear from him when he had the opportunity to hear from us. We could never just reach out to him. And he had a 2-year-old at the time too, which made things even more interesting.
Like the main history of the widow's walk and the sailors' wives waiting.
Yeah, I know. And Penelope was also the thing that surprised me about it. It's one of those things when you're writing a persona poem where you're not technically the I, it sometimes will bring you to a place that surprises you. So that idea of we're both heroes of the same story, we're both going through an ordeal, these are two stories happening on parallel tracks, was something that hadn't occurred to me when I started. So that was a fun discovery.
What I love is the weaving in this and the unweaving. And of course, that's the reference to the Penelope saying, yeah, I'll marry one of you after I'm finished this tapestry. And of course, every night she goes in and she pulls out all the threads of the day's work, and how you stitch it all together at the end with that, we'll once more unravel and weave over again. And it's making that marriage new again. And it's such a beautiful love poem.
Thank you. I do love poems. I think there are poets who say every poem is a love poem and no poem is a love poem in one way or another, but it's fun to just have one that is just straight up love poem. Laurel referenced, I did bring a couple of new poems tonight that Laurel referenced one of them. So if you'd like me to read that one, I would be happy to, or do something else from.
I would like to hear that you don't like to travel. Yeah.
Thanks. And of course, this will be in something else, a different, hopefully, whatever book comes next, not anywhere near Penelope. So it'll be interesting to see if anybody connects the two or not. But let's see. This is called You Don't Like to Travel, So I've Learned to Go Alone. I miss it sometimes, the shape of you away from home. Wonder how you'd change in another light. There's an island I go to, so far out that with nothing in its way, the light is the air light. No sand there between rock ledge and sea. How would it be, your Catholic silence, your way of wondering, beside mine, agnostic, in a stoic stone chapel, rain on stained glass? That gnarled veteran of a tree, I know it's gorgeous. You'd know its name. But you've been to the desert and back. You've seen enough, you say. And each time I go, I remember, I'm glad you're not there, that I needed an alternative view and space to hear my own thoughts on it. A relentless songbird, loud in its strangeness, that wakes me early outside a window with peachy curtains I'd never have chosen. People to hear and not speak to. A stand of birches like paper ghosts to walk to. If I'm quiet long enough, what I mean and the words for it meet. I won't go far. The thought of you holds a warm space. Back home, the peas are planted and open already under frosty soil. The trellis poised for their slender fingers, like your elbow's nook my hand likes best. Your kiss, two truths at once, a sexy stranger and a rival.
Beautiful.
I hadn't thought of how linked those two are until you asked me to read that one next to it. So that was actually really cool.
You picked
The
that.
island and the references together.
About the last poem, you mentioned not knowing exactly where it was going when you started. Is that common? I'm the lone prose writer amongst the poets, so I'm going to ask this question. You think, as many people probably wonder about the process of writing a poem, and I think it's a little more, for most people, it's easier to conceptualize wriing a novel, probably. So
I can't even fathom it. I don't know how you do it.
do you always know where you're going? Or is each bit of it informing what's coming next?
I rarely know where it's going. There are rare occasions when something comes through all in one go, and I had a vision of what I wanted it to be like, and then it matches what that vision is. That doesn't happen very often. It does sometimes. But there are lots of poems where, especially the longer ones or the ones that deal with a more difficult emotional state, where I do surprise myself, or just say something in a way that's starker and kind of holds myself to the mirror in a way that I wasn't expecting. Let's see, an example of that is one that's called Wintertide. I think my mom's here, so she loves and hates this one at the same time. But she's an artist too, so she gets it. But this one was one of the newest in the book when the book was finished. One of the last ones added in at the end. And for me, this was one of those ones where I was partway through and I was almost done and I was feeling good about myself. And then I was like, kind of slap myself silly a little bit toward the end, where which you'll see. I'll read it for you. It's called Wintertide. My mother thought it a mercy to dig up this hand of dirt from the lake where we buried Dad's ashes, the land for sale and leaving the family name. I'd made peace with the lake, but she means it a mercy to have something to keep, and these not ashes I didn't ask for must settle somewhere other than my dresser. A drive to the beach then, the same one as always, sandwich box of dirt in the passenger seat. His weekends we spent half the time driving. Those rarer rides in the front, I'd scooch my hand under his, feel the gears shift. Driving here, plates of ice cracked loose from trucks to fly straight up and drop into shards, and all around drivers held to our lines. I'm here again, the waves louder, on frozen sand. Face it, girl. Peace was a sign you planted, a name tag on a woolly sweater. Give him to the earth again, before another wave gets in your boots. That's the one that I didn't know I was going to write Face It Girl until I did. That was one of those ones that snuck up and surprised me.
And the writer's always in conversation with themselves and with the world. So
yeah. And the poems in a book are kind of in conversation with themselves, like your letters are.
No, I didn't have it plot, this particular novel plotted out either.
Yeah.
The character drove the story completely, sometimes against my will.
Yeah,
Richard.
and it was interesting after I had read the whole thing, now and hearing you read the first letter again, when she says something about not having any musical chops herself, I was like, well, yeah, she does.
She's got imposter syndrome.
Yeah,
she doesn't
definitely.
believe in herself. She's in a band with some of the top musicians in the country for 60 years, and she was from the country and played at the county fair. So
yeah.
Can we hear
Can you read a little bit more, Laurel? I'm sorry, Richard.
No, I was just going to say the same thing. Can we hear the next letter?
Okay. Some of the letters are very far apart in time. They're not dated, as was mentioned earlier, but this one is probably just the next day. She's just come back to the river again. And she's had some experience with the town at this point. So she's just moved back in the first letter. She's been around town a little bit. Dear Gerald, early this morning, I called up the Monotony Cemetery Committee and asked them if there was any room in the Fight Brook burial ground. Despite looking half empty, it is closed and has been since 1921. But I have a great, great, great aunt and uncle resting in peace under the old oak tree, waiting for me there. I've been on the move, on the road forever, and soon enough it will be time for a permanent patch of ground to rest my bones. And I prefer it to be ground consecrated by kin. Closed or not, I'll try to find a way in. Once in, there I will stay. To stay in one place seems so appealing. I have so many cities under my belt: New York, Boston, Los Angeles, Detroit, Dallas, Chicago, Memphis, Reno. Rolling in under cover of darkness with the band, met by screaming crowds, seeking oblivion in someone's arms, doing the whole thing again 300 miles down the highway. We were vagabonds, a band of famous and anonymous drifters. Our sound brought thousands of people together, and not one of them ever had a glimpse of who we really were. Thousands of shows, and we made no permanent connections. Wait, I take part of that back. Lawrence connected to 1 or 2 or 3 particularly fetching girls every 2 nights stay, and I with him. But that is a nameless fuck, not an intimacy. Now, don't fret about my language, nor about the sex. Things have changed since the 1950s. And just because I'm an old lady doesn't mean I am good. I have been bad, very bad, far worse than you. Even the animals know it. As I sit here on the top of Mount Tom, 2 jays are reciting my sins. A cheeky red squirrel, its tiny back legs thumping against the branch, is scolding me. And even the crows atop the pines are taking a vituperative tone. I'm getting closer to the river, and nature is throwing down the unwelcome mat. And well, she should. I am an environmentalist nightmare. My flesh has been pickled by so many drugs, I ought to walk around with a hazmat warning sign around my neck. I abandoned nature completely for decades, traded our lovely, soft landscapes for the dirty, sharp edges of nightclubs and stadiums. I've left outdoor concert venues that fans covered from end to end with garbage without feeling an iota of responsibility. I did not procreate, did not contribute a person to the whims of nature's evolutionary playground. I no longer have any connection to the land, and from the sound of its emissaries loudly encouraging me to turn back, nature knows it. What I had instead were lots and lots of people and lots of fights. Jealous rages, frustrated meltdowns, angry outbursts complete with broken plates. You wouldn't have recognized me back then. I had some rough decades there. The free love 60s and the free to be you and me 70s, every minute of which I spent stoned or under one band member or another, and feeling completely and vastly alone while shoulder to shoulder with my tribe in the middle of 2,000 fans. Knowing that I wasn't good enough to be on that stage and taking it out on anyone who looked at me sideways. It is a long way from the band shell at the county fair to the Fillmore, but I made it there, if only by virtue of marriage. To be sure, I did play fiddle well enough to impress the judges. You heard me play. I was good. Lawrence heard me the year you died when I was playing my pain away, and I was even better. He heard me play on a Sunday night. The rest of Fair Week he romanced me, and when they swept out the band shell for the last time, I left with him and did not look back. His band was in its infancy then. I was there for every growing pain, every bumped head, every loose tooth, and I was there for the band's growth spurt, Lawrence's meteoric rise, and the real deal pot-scented hippie guru fame, the stardom. But no matter how Lawrence and I tried, no matter how brightly he and his bandmates burned, we were atoms, millions of miles apart, profoundly disconnected. In retrospect, I see there was no other way for me to be without you. That one time with you on the river eclipsed 1,000 times with him on the road. One perfect moment. I always had that. I don't think my husband ever found it. No, not even with me. Love, Mimsy.
That's the moment I fell in love with Mimsy. Not even with me. It's so full of life, self-awareness, and she's smart. And I love how you bring in all the birds and the red squirrel and, you know, the crows, and you say it's Freiburg is
It's based on Freiburg, and when people ask me what inspired the novel, I say homesickness, because I had to move after living in Freiburg and loving the beauty of it and the isolation of it. I had to move for a job in the family, and immediately started writing a novel about it. So I couldn't, because I just needed to keep it with me. And my characters are all, Mimsy is an amalgamation, basically, of maybe 20 or 30 strong women I know, probably. And I think you love her all the time I loved her when I was writing about her, and I cried at the end because I wouldn't be with her any longer because the book was over. So and she led the way on a lot of what happens in the book.
She really
did not
has
plot
the
it out.
agency throughout. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Now that you've written a full epistolary novel, has it changed the way you write letters to your friends and family?
I've been a letter writer all my life, even when I was really young. The first day I went off to kindergarten, my sister cried when I got in the bus. So at school, I wrote her a little letter and pretended it was from a bug with some name that I can't remember. And I put it in the mailbox for her, so it would be there the next day when she waved goodbye to me. So I love letters. I think they're like Richard was talking about with the heirlooms and the treasures and the memories they bring back. The letters are also disappearing. And I think without that sort of ability to hold in your hand another person's words, we have lost something. So I encourage all of the listeners today to write letters.
Yeah, I was telling my daughter tonight about this, that I was going to be with another poet and with a person whose book was written in letters. And she was familiar with that, but then she said, well, yeah, I read something that was written all in text messages. And half of me cringed because, but half of me was like, yay, cool way to be creative with today's technology.
I think it's still considered an epistolary novel if it's text messages.
It's got emojis and text language and stuff. I'm trying not to be a snob about it.
Don't be a snob. So which one of you poets wants to finish up the evening? Something.
How much time do we have, Robert?
4 minutes.
4 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Richard, you want to each do one?
Yeah.
To close us off?
Okay. I'll do, Ode to My Left Hand.
I love that one.
Ode to My Left Hand. Today I noticed your tremor at the margin of my book when I read what D.H. Lawrence has to say about building a ship for the voyage of oblivion. And I thought, who am I to urge us on at this late stage, to navigate without caring where we've been, or to set out knowing every crafted hull must sink. Submissive slave, I've watched you raise martinis to my lips, strike a match to flood my lungs with self-delusion, tease me or another to the edge, then push beyond the brink. Though I laugh at your seismic clatter with a teacup on a saucer, I cannot fault you now that each day alters the map of who you are. New mottlings on a sea of inelastic skin, more cracks and runnels along blue arroyos. Still you caress, cradle, scour, run a razor daily across my cheek, peel tangerines and zest the air I breathe off your fingertips, or greet a friend and with a gesture like a blossom's gentle trembling bring poignancy to departure. Dear one, heaven has always been at hand. Take up your pen, it is the tiller. Epistolary in a way. Mhm.
Thank you, Richard. I want to read a comment by Marion Percy. Laurel, I'm with you about letter writing. Remember when stamps were 5 cents? Letter writing is an art. Thank you for your reading tonight.
That's very
Thank you,
nice.
Marion. And Kate, are you going to take us out with a poem?
Sure. I have lots of poems that are letters too, but I'm going to end with a different one. It's the second to last one in the book. One of my favorite words, the penultimate one. It's called Love Poem with Faults. Ever since sand was sand and water water, they've followed each other around. They lift and settle all over the cracked earth. Never the same 2 days in a row, but shift after shift, sand stays sand, water, water. The land is made of meeting places. Deep beneath the mirror, earth on earth knocks crusty elbows, and from the cracks, new ground blooms. Fissures form and settle, fill with water, sky, and tiny flecks we don't yet know exist. At the center, a magnet. This implausible life began as a singularity that burst apart into breakfast, amygdala, and birch bark that burns even when it's wet. I'm saying there are days I want to shake you, days I love better from away. Your misplaced glasses, your cereal for dinner. I'm thinking love's a glance back at singularity, a body's memory of a universe, all its fault lines and fig leaves pressed together, patient and light as a dandelion seed. But I'm too comfortable with silence to tell you so.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you all for a very memorable evening. Any questions from the audience? Any final comments from the readers?
Can we see them visually? Can they?
Sure. If people would like to turn on their videos, please do it this time. There's Annalise, Jachimides. Hello, Annalise and Jenny. Kate, Kennedy. Hi, Kate.
Sorry, Anna.
Oh, and there's Lori, who made all our books so beautiful.
Lori Harley. This is a great time to announce next month's Littorally Alive will be Lori Harley talking about the creation of her wonderful books, or Littoral Books. And also Leslie Moore will be reading and talking about her artwork from her latest Grackledom, also published by Littoral Books. So we have another great show in addition to tonight's great shows.
Mhm.
We're definitely lucky to have Lori designing these books.
Yes.
I mean, this red page inside your book, Richard, it's just,
I know. And Douglas's, two of Douglas's work and part of one of Douglas's paintings on the cover. And I was really sort of surprised by it because I had been suggesting other artworks, and I think Lori went to Doug's website and pulled these, and so it's delightful, and to have my partner's work in it is very meaningful to me. And I've been singing your praises, Lori, far and wide. That
Me
I
too.
mean, really, I worked as a typesetter for many years, and your work is just it's beautiful, it's careful, it's artful. So thank you.
Everyone who has picked up either my book or Jillian Barnes' book, she reads with me sometimes, has commented on this, how stunning the design of all the books that they've seen from Littoral Press is. And they're just wonderful to hold in the hand and just beautiful to look upon.
And I just also want to say that I so appreciate Agnes and Jim for curating such amazing content to be able to work on, because that's what makes, of course, the books. Yeah, wonderful.
And I would just want to say, Phyllis, if you're there in Seattle, I just want to say hi and thank you for tuning in this evening.
So thank everybody for coming, and I always hate to end these conversations, but we're going to have to end it for now. And please join us next month, and we'll continue.
And Jerry,
Robert.
you're Jerry Mariani, my classmate from from way back. Thank you for tuning in too.
It really was fabulous. The conversation and the energy amongst the three of you made for a great night. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's fun.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Agnes.
Thanks for
Thank
being
you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good
Oh,
night.
You too.
there's Jim.
Go ahead, Jim.
Good night, Jim.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
I don't leave until everybody leaves, so
Oh, all
Well,
right.
that was fun.
It was a lot of fun. So
thank you all.
Wonderful evening. Thank you.
All right. Good night. Thank you, Robert.